I'm just going to get started because it is time. So yeah, I really wanted to do this to celebrate my first year anniversary since launching Crystal Dawn Culinary. I can't believe it's been a year already. Like, time just flies. And yeah, so I really wanted to come up with a summer-based dessert recipe. So this is a brand new recipe. I literally just finished testing it yesterday. So it was kind of a last minute recipe, but it's really good. I'm really excited about it and you're all gonna love it. Here on the west coast of Vancouver, BC, we get blackberries that grow wild. Yeah, so blackberries grow wild everywhere here. They're just like, everywhere you go, there's blackberries. So I just really wanted to incorporate blackberries somewhere. I really like the combination of lime with berries, so I decided to incorporate lime into the crust. And then we have a blackberry filling, and then we have white chocolate on top because the white chocolate's really gonna help cut through the tardiness of the berries and the lime and the rest of the flavors of the cake. So this is an amazing recipe and I'm really excited for you guys to all learn it. Now, I don't really like to call it a cheesecake, although it looks like a cheesecake, but in the raw cake world, raw cheesecakes have definitely become their own category because like this cake does not resemble a traditional cheesecake. So technically, I mean, I would just call this a raw cake, right? We're not really making a traditional cheesecake. So, you know, it looks like a cheesecake. It might kind of taste like a cheesecake, but definitely not anything close to a traditional cheesecake recipe. So I'm just gonna get started then because I know you guys are probably all really eager to get into this recipe. But actually, we're gonna talk about molds first, right? I wanted to mention about molds because I really want you guys to use what you have at home. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of fancy equipment, okay? So there's a bunch of different molds that you can use for this recipe, and I'll show you. Okay, so for today, because I've had to test this recipe so much, my freezer is already full of this cheesecake. And so I'm not gonna make another full size because I have enough cheesecake I don't need. So I'm gonna be half batching the recipe and I'm gonna be doing it in a small 4-inch springform pan. And I'm gonna show you guys the end result is also in this pan so you can see how it looks. Just because, like I said, I have just way too much cake on hand. Or you can use this entire recipe will go in a 6-inch cake ring. Hopefully you guys can see this okay with the light. So this is a 6-inch cake ring. When you're using cake rings, you have to line them with a cake collar because otherwise it's not going to come out of the mold. And I'll just show you what I mean by that. First of all, you're going to want to get a lined tray. So I just take a cutting board, like just one of those little plastic ones, and I put parchment paper on top, and then I put the cake ring on top of the tray. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take your cake collar. This is also called acetate sheets. Acetate sheets or cake collar, you can get them on Amazon. All of these tools and equipment I'm using today, I got them on Amazon here in Canada. So most definitely you can get them on Amazon in the US. I'm pretty sure Amazon. So then you're going to take your cake collar and you're just going to wrap it around and you're going to cut it just to measure the portion that you need. So once it's cut, then you're going to place it into the ring and you're just going to keep it in place there while you're doing your crust because then when you put the crust in, it's going to stay in place. And so this will also help create a really nice clean line when you finish off your cake because it'll come really nice out of the cake ring and then you're able to peel off that cake collar. So because I'm using a 4-inch springform pan, I don't need the cake collar because for a springform pan you don't because this is what these are made for. But what you have to do in the springform pans is you need to line the bottom. Right, because this comes out separately in the springform pan. So put either cling film or parchment paper on the bottom because then your cake will come out much easier. And then you're just going to put this back on and then do it back up in place like this. And I kind of just go like this just to get the air out. So you only need the cake collar if you're using the cake rings. So for this recipe, if you use a 6-inch cake ring, this cake is going to be very, very thick and it's going to be very tall. I personally don't like really big pieces of raw cake like that. I like them a bit smaller, but everyone has their own preference. A lot of people love the 6-inch and making the really high cakes. So like I was saying, the 6-inch cake makes a really high cake. And then you can also use an 8-inch cake ring, and this will make it a little bit smaller, right? So if you're like me and you want a little bit of a thinner cake, then I would use the 8-inch cake ring. Or you can go a step further and use a 10-inch springform pan. So this is going to make the cake really thin. But I would recommend leaning more towards the 8-inch for this recipe. But if you have an 8-inch springform pan, you can use that as well. This is a really large one, so I don't think that the full batch would fit in here. You'd probably need a little bit more. So for equipment, for the crust, you're going to need a food processor. And then for the fillings, we're going to need a high-speed blender. Okay, so whenever we're doing any kind of raw cake, so I really want to tell you, so this crust is actually date-free. A lot of my students are watching, so they know in my recipes that I don't like to use dates in my crust. I do in some of the crust, it depends kind of on the texture I want to achieve. And the reason why is because I just feel like dried fruit becomes really heavy when you're mixing it with fat and nuts. It can get really hard on the digestive system because a raw cake can be really heavy already. Adding the dates just makes it that much more. So I came up with a cake crust recipe, with a raw crust recipe that's completely free of dates, but will give you that exact same cakey texture when you bite into it. So it's not hard, not super crunchy, but it's nice and soft and has a really good texture, and you guys are gonna love it. I'm so excited. And this crust recipe, you guys can totally adapt this. You guys can modify it and do it any kind of flavor to suit the flavor of cake that you're making. So whenever you're doing any kind of crust or energy bite or energy bar in the food processor, you always want to start with your dry ingredients first. And that's because we want to break them down into about a flour consistency before you start adding your wet ingredients. Because what's going to happen when you add in your wet ingredients, everything is going to start forming together and kind of go into a ball in the food processor, and then it's going to be really hard to process. You're not going to be able to process it properly. So in this recipe, for the base, for the crust base, we're using almonds and coconut. You'll see on the crust recipe that we're going to be adding in the almonds second, and because we're doing this for texture, because I don't know about you, but I love texture in my recipes, especially my cake recipes. So if I'm eating something like a cake recipe that has really smooth, creamy fillings, I'm going to want some texture in my crust because I just like a little bit of crunch. So first we're going to put in the coconut. And remember, you guys, I'm half batching this for myself, right? So when you make this recipe and you make the full portions, it's going to be different consistencies of ingredients. And then, so we have, this is the berry powder I'm using today. So this is acai berry powder, and you can see how dark and purple that is. Like, imagine how many antioxidants are in there. You can just see all the polyphenols. So I'm using acai berry powder. You can also use maqui berry powder. So first we want to add in the coconut, and then we're going to add in our berry powder. And then we're going to be adding in some powdered coconut sugar. Now this is really important, you guys, because you want to make sure that you powder the coconut sugar in your blender before you use it in the crust. See, so this is a powder consistency, or you can powder it in your spice grinder. This is because the food processor is not going to fully break down the coconut sugar, and we don't want it to be really grainy. So we want that coconut sugar to really blend in. And then we have just a little bit of Himalayan salt just to kind of balance out the flavors. And the only recipe component in this entire recipe I'm using salt in is in the crust. So that's it, just those first few dry ingredients. So I'm going to turn this on. And I'm just going to process this up until it reaches kind of a flour consistency, and then we're going to put in the almonds. So you can see this beautiful purple color that we have already. Looks really nice. So now we're going to start adding in the almonds. And again, for those of you who are just joining, I'm adding the almonds second because I want to add some texture into this crust. So I didn't want them fully broken down. So I'm going to process this until it's still chunky. That's good. So you just want to break them down because remember I have to turn this on again when I add in the wet ingredients. So now we're going to start adding the wet ingredients. So this is where we get that lovely cakey texture that I was talking about. So this is why we're using a dry sugar plus a liquid sweetener, because just for texture wise, okay? So I'm using coconut nectar. You can also use agave. You can use maple syrup. They're all going to give you the same flavor. So any liquid sweetener you guys have on hand, okay? You don't have to go out finding coconut nectar. It is hard to find in some places. So I'm using coconut nectar in my recipes because it's low glycemic. It has a lot of minerals. But again, just use whatever you have on hand at home. And then we're adding in some coconut oil. So coconut oil is going to help add some moisture, but it's also going to help bind everything together when it's set in the fridge, because coconut oil goes cold when it's set, right? So this is why we use a lot of coconut oil in raw desserts and raw foods, because if you're not baking, you need something to bind it together. So this is why we use coconut oil and cacao butter as setting agents in our recipes. So because this is a berry lime crust, I have some lime juice. I'm not going to put it all in right now because I just want to see the consistency we get as I blend it up. And then I have lime zest. So this is lime zest just grated on a microplane grater like this. So this is, or a citrus zester, it's also called microplane grater. You can get these on Amazon, any home or kitchen store. It's very important to use fresh, okay? So I want you guys to use fresh lime juice. Please don't buy that bottled stuff from the store because it's not going to give you the same flavor, trust me. Fresh lime juice is just so potent and super flavorful. And then adding the lime zest, adding citrus zest to recipes is just going to bring it up a notch and just add that extra zing. And the zest has so much flavor. Oh, it smells so good. So this is fresh lime zest that I just zested this morning. And I just love berry and lime together. I think the two flavors just marry so nice. And then we're adding in some vanilla. So I'll talk about these vanilla essences, but a lot of you already here know about these medicine flower essences. I'll just give a short little spiel. So these are the medicine flower extracts that I use. They're flavor extracts that are super potent, CO2 extracted. You only need a few drops. They are not that expensive because you only need a little bit at a time. So if you don't have these on hand, I know a lot of you here do, then you can just use regular vanilla extract. So I put the portion in here for that. So I said, or 1 teaspoon vanilla extract. So I'm just going to turn this on. It already started sticking together and it was forming a ball, so we know that that's ready. And I'll show you guys the consistency here. I'll give you a close-up. So you can see that there's a lot of moisture and it's kind of sticky. So this is the consistency you want. It is supposed to be wet and sticky, okay? Because this is what's going to give it that cakey texture when it's set. So this, don't be worried about that. This is what you want. And I love the color, it smells amazing. I can really smell that lime. So then what you're gonna do is we're gonna take our lined springform pan, and remember I'm using a 4-inch because I'm half batching this recipe because I have lots of cake. So you're just gonna start taking your crust, and I'm gonna have some extra crust left over, which is fine. So I'm just pressing the batter into the bottom. And this is gonna be sticky. Your hands are gonna get messy, but don't worry about that. You can always wash them. So I'm gonna put this into the bottom, and I'm just going to, so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just pressing it down as much as I can before I grab a spoon. Actually, I can put a little bit more in. You don't want to go too thick with this. If you're using a springform pan like this, you don't want the crust to be too thick. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take the back of a little spoon and you're just going to start smoothing it out. If it's really sticky and the spoon is sticking to the crust, you can put water on the spoon. Just get like a little glass of water and dip it in. So you just want to smooth this out as much as you can. I like to get it nice and even because I'm just anal like that. But again, everyone has their own preference. Some people like that texture in the top of the crust. Okay, so that looks good. There we have our crust in the bottom of the pan. Like, look how easy that was. So this is the blackberry ginger filling, and I decided to add ginger into this because I just love flavor in my recipes. It's just gonna add that little pop. You know, when someone, if you make this cake for someone and they're eating it, and they get through that blackberry layer and they just taste it, they're just gonna know, they're gonna be like, wow, what is that flavor? Like, it just pops on your tongue. So for the filling, we're gonna blend up all of the ingredients except for the coconut oil. And I just want to mention a little bit about the blackberries. So I did put on the recipe, if you're using frozen blackberries, please measure after they've been thawed because it's going to be a completely different volume. And also too, you want to drain the water out because we don't want to add any more liquid to this recipe. So if you're using fresh blackberries, you don't have to worry about that. So I've already drained most of the liquid out, but there's still some that got in here. And then we're going to add in our almond milk. So we have our liquid sweetener. So again, I'm using coconut nectar. But like I said, you can use any liquid sweetener. So you can use maple syrup, agave, whatever you have on hand. And then we're going to add in a little bit of lemon juice just to give it some acidity to balance it out. And sunflower lecithin. So let's talk about sunflower lecithin. So sunflower lecithin I love to use in my recipes because it acts as a great emulsifier. I'll show you what it looks like. So this is sunflower lecithin. You don't want to use soy lecithin because most of it is GMO. If you can find non-GMO soy lecithin, you can use that as well. If you can't get lecithin at all, you can totally omit it. That's fine. It does make a difference, so if you can find it, it's best to use it. So now I'm going to add in some ginger because, like I said, I love a pop of flavor in my recipes, and I'm using the microplane grater. So I'm just going to grate in some ginger, about a teaspoon, or more if you like ginger. I love ginger. So I'm going to blend this up until it gets really smooth before I add in the coconut oil. And the reason why I do that is because if you've just pulled your almond milk out of the fridge, if you have any cold ingredients in here, as soon as you introduce the coconut oil, it will start setting and it's going to be hard to blend and not get as smooth. So just as a precaution, I just like to add it last just so that I know it's going to be extra smooth. So I'm just going to blend this up. For those who don't have a Vitamix, I'm just starting it on low and then I'm going to increase it to high. So now I'm going to add in the coconut oil. Yeah, Jennifer, the blackberries, like this is probably my favorite color right now of the filling. I just love that purple. Like it's a really nice purple color. So now I'm going to add in the coconut oil. I'm going to put it on low. So this filling looks beautiful. It's really, really smooth. I'll just show you guys. Yeah, the color is really nice and it smells even more amazing. So this is what we want. So you want to make sure that this is really smooth, because I'm going to show you what we're going to do with some of this. There's lots of air bubbles in here, which is fine. So we're going to put it into our crust, but we also want to reserve about 2 tablespoons to use it for the marble on top. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So first, I'm going to take my crust and I'm going to pour it in. Like I said, you want to make sure that you have enough left over. And make sure you have enough room for the other layer. So I'm going to show you guys a close-up here. You just want to make sure you get out some of those air bubbles. So you want to put the filling that you've reserved into your squeeze bottle for after. Okay, so there's very few ingredients for the white chocolate layer. We only have our cashews, the almond milk, the coconut nectar, the sunflower lecithin, which is going to do the same thing as we use it in the blackberry layer. And then we are using cacao butter instead of coconut oil, because this is going to help give it that white chocolate flavor. So cacao butter is also going to be the setting agent in this, right? But you have to remember when you're doing recipes and you're using coconut oil versus cacao butter has a much higher melting point. So it's going to be much more solid at room temperature. So it's a very strong setting agent. And so here we're not going to be using as much. So the white chocolate layer is the exact same as the blackberry layer. Really, really simple. We just have our cashews, soak them for about 2 hours and rinse them really well. We're just soaking the cashews to soften them. Cashews don't actually have phytic acid or enzyme inhibitors, so we're only soaking to soften them. You don't need to soak them for that other purpose. So we have our almond milk, sunflower lecithin, and our liquid sweetener. Like I said, you can use agave, maple syrup, whatever you have on hand. And so just like the blackberry layer, we're going to add in our cacao butter at the end, because we want to make sure that we get this really nice and smooth. So I've got all my ingredients in here except for the cacao butter. I'm going to get it really nice and smooth, and then I'm going to add in the cacao butter. So now we have our filling, it's all nice and smooth. So now I'm going to add in the cacao butter. Make sure your cacao butter is totally melted. It's just a bit cool in here, so it had started setting already. So now I'm going to blend this up again until it gets really well incorporated and smooth. So I just blended this a little bit longer than it needed to, just to remelt down that cacao butter, but it doesn't have to be blended for that long. So normally what you would do when you're making this cake, you want to set the berry layer first in the freezer for about an hour before you put the white chocolate layer on top. That's if you want that layered effect. Now, because for this live demo, I don't have a 1-layer cake done already. I have a full version for you guys. I'm still going to pour the white layer on, but it's going to give a marbled effect. And I'm going to still show you how to do this technique on the top that I do with the marbling. And this layer is already pretty thick. It might work. So who knows, we will see. You're welcome, Shruti. Okay, so I don't want to overfill this too much. And I'm just going to pat it on the counter like I did with the blackberry filling to remove some of the air bubbles. Okay, so that's good. So I don't want this any more full. This is full enough. So now the fun part, you get to see how I make this lovely design on top. I'm really excited to show you guys. What you want is your squeeze bottle, okay, we have the rest of the blackberry filling in here. And I have a skewer, or you can use a toothpick for this. It totally doesn't matter, up to you. So what you want to do is you just want to do dots. Start in the middle and start going all the way out like this. I'm very patient, so just be patient if you can. And get the dots as nice and even as you want. Okay, so we're going to start with that. And then you want to take your toothpick or skewer like I'm using, and you just start marbling it like this. You can go as crazy as you want. There's really no like strict method to this. It's just kind of use your eyes and your creativity. You can do different colors. So you don't want to go too crazy. That's good. See, super simple. And look at how pretty that looks. So that's how you get that marbled effect on top of cheesecakes. So then at this point, what you're going to do is you're going to put it in the freezer for it to set. So I'm going to put that in right now. Okay, so this is the blackberry frosting. And you can see how nice and creamy that is. So this is actually one of my favorite frostings now that I've come up with. So I need to find something else to use this blackberry frosting for. So I'm gonna have to come up with like some kind of blackberry cake, or yeah, I just absolutely love this. So to do the frosting, so you'll see in the recipe, it explains that the blackberry frosting, you want to set it in the fridge, but if it's not firm enough for piping, then you want to put it in the freezer for about 30 minutes. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my piping bag because this is going to melt fast. So what you want to do is you want to get a piping bag. So sorry guys, I don't have a reusable piping bag. I'm using a disposable one today, but I do reuse these. And you want to use a 1M tip. So I'll just show you what it looks like. So this is the 1M tip. It looks like a star on the bottom. And this is going to give a really nice effect when we decorate it. So I have my piping tip in my piping bag. So I want to put the frosting in here. So I'm just going to add some in. You don't need to put too much. And you just want to get it down to the end like this. Twist the top and just do a test. So that looks good. So this is what the cake looks like, you guys. So it's still thawing, it's still kind of frozen. I should have pulled it out sooner, but so again, see how simple that was? You can get something really elegant, pretty, colorful, vibrant, just from really simple ingredients. We didn't even use a lot of ingredients. Okay, so let's see if this is gonna allow me. Oh, maybe. Thank goodness I have a really good knife. So when you cut a cake, if you see what I did, let me just move this. If you see what I did there, I sliced down, okay? I didn't bring the knife back up because what you're gonna do is the layers are gonna run into each other. So when you slice a cake, you bring it down and then you pull it out, okay? And then you wanna wipe your knife before you do your next cut. So again, see, I'm gonna pull it out. I didn't bring it back up. Turned out really nice, and so this is really easy for you guys to do at home. And yeah, I'm gonna go enjoy this cake. So you guys all have a wonderful day, and thank you again for joining.